My name is Noma,
And I'm Maggie.
and this is Independent Development Plan. We want students to become better self-directed learners, and metacognitive reflection on work processes has been shown to help students progress towards effective self-direction.
Throughout our project, we wanted to learn how best to support students in doing thoughtful and productive self-reflection. Our research questions included those like, how do we help students reflect on behaviors that are most relevant and important to them? How do we make reflection easy and relatively fast, yet still effective? How do we ensure that students are growing from reflection and incorporating learnings into their work processes?
So, from our need finding, we realized that students don't always seek out help even when they need it. There are many reasons that students have noted, including feeling like they have spent their question capital, in quotes, by asking the same person too many questions, not knowing how to effectively break down their problem to people who are not on their team or in their special interest group, feeling annoying after asking too many questions, and not wanting to admit that they don't know something that they feel they should know.
In terms of tech, our prototype consists of two parts, both of which are sent to users over Slack about once a week. User interviews indicated that responding to questions over Slack easily fit into their schedules, and because we didn't want this prototype to seem like a huge blocker, that's why we decided to use this medium. So first, users are sent a Google form. The Google form asks them to quickly describe a blocker that they're currently facing and then to check off help-seeking breakdowns they exhibited during the past week. And so here is like an example of one student's responses. The form was designed so that students could, one, ground their reflection in personal stories from the past week to avoid using cliches in their responses, and two, so that they could identify relevant processes so that they could do more targeted reflection to address behaviors that were most relevant to their past week. Based on the behaviors that they checked off, the students were then slacked self-reflection prompts designed to help them reflect on why that breakdown occurred and how it could be improved in the future.
At the end of the quarter, we introduced a new conversational feature. Rather than sending all of the self-reflection prompts at once, we sent them one by one, only sending the next prompt after the previous one had been responded to. This was done to make the prototype seem more natural and less difficult to complete, after users indicated that receiving all of the prompts in a big block was intimidating, and made them feel unwilling to start filling out the prototype.
So our first round of testing focused on finding a specific user problem that we could fix concretely. This covered a few weeks of testing very tailored individual reflection prompts to help the user realize a better process when it came to help seeking. About every 5 days, we sent this one specific user a few new prompts based on a previously identified blocker and their previous responses to prompts. These prompts were very specific to that user and were edited and or created by hand before they were sent out. We validated our hypothesis that more specific prompts help students do richer and more thoughtful reflection. This was the main motivation for the Google Form feature for our prototype so that we could sell prompts that were specific to each student.
Our second round of testing focused on generalizing the first round without losing its effectiveness. We wanted to make a prototype that could be easily scaled to support a whole undergraduate research community. We created a system that would allow students to identify on a Google form, mentioned above, negative help-seeking behaviors they displayed. For each of these behaviors, we created prompts that would help the students reflect on why they exhibited that behavior and would nudge them into realizing how they can develop better new behaviors. We learned that asking students to describe specific personal stories helps them tie their responses back to their work processes. An absence of specificity in their responses may result in students using cliches rather than reflecting on their actual learning state.
So on the screen right now is just an example of our prototype being sent out. So as you can see, first we sent the form, and then after they filled out the form, we would send the self-reflection prompts. And then here is an example of like one student's responses. We just copy and pasted them into our Slack channel. Our third round of testing set out to fix the obstacles that we encountered in the second round. So that To help users better tie the reflections to a specific block run story, we added that space on our form for users to describe the blocker that they currently struggle with, where they invested a lot of unproductive time working alone, but help seeking could have helped. We haven't implemented this yet, but we also want to include a part that says if you are not currently struggling with a blocker, describe one from the past week. Okay. We also iterated on our prompts to make them so that they more directly ask for a user to write personal storytelling responses.
We learned that students found the prototype intimidating and confusing because the prompts were long and set in a large block of text. This resulted in users not completing all of the prompts because they didn't realize that multiple prompts required separate responses, and perhaps caused them to delay completing the prototype. After this round of testing, we also conducted a user interview to understand the general experience of using the prototype. We had users read over past responses and discuss what aspects of the prompts were helpful or confusing in helping them think about their learning processes. Users also responded to questions about timing, whether they found the prototype useful, and the interface. We learned that having students read back over their past responses helps remind them of realizations from past reflections. Revisiting past responses can also help them realize productive or unproductive behaviors they've been exhibiting that were more difficult to identify in the moment. We also learned that students didn't fully understand why the prototype or specifically certain prompts were useful in helping them become better self-directed learners.
Our final round of testing sought to test the conversational model of the prototype. In this model, we sent each prompt one by one to the user as they responded in real time. This was meant to alleviate the initial intimidation users indicated that they feel when they see the prompts in Slack, which usually looks like a large looming block of text, as well as to make the prototype more natural for users to use. Instead of writing an essay, they feel like they're simply having a conversation. Here we learned a few things. One, the conversational model does work to alleviate the intimidation felt when completing the prompts, as noted by this quote from a user. It was jarring to jump from one topic to another. I sometimes felt that my responses were less detailed than they could have been due to how many questions I had to answer. Two, that this conversational bot needs to be well-timed to ensure continuous engagement. Human error and slowness, as opposed to ideally a bot, made this difficult to test with wizarding. And three, that if users did not have a blocker to report, they were not sure what else to do except to not use the prototype. We want to make sure that users are always reflecting, so this is undesirable.
So now we're going to talk about what worked, what didn't work, and some of our limitations. So some of what worked. In a post-survey, users indicated that they found the prototype useful in helping them think through some of their help-seeking behaviors. We also did a lot of interesting need finding to better understand the challenges inherent to effective self-reflection and the support required to help overcome those challenges.
However, there are also some challenges and some things that didn't work. So for example, users didn't understand why exactly the prototype was useful and didn't always respond to the entirety of the prompts. They mentioned that this occurred because the prototype seemed time-intensive and difficult to complete, so they were resistant to starting such a cognitively difficult task. More need finding will be useful in further understanding why these problems arise and how they might be resolved.
Some limitations of our work this quarter includes like human wizarding versus a quote-unquote stupid machine Slack bot. The limitations of a bot became clear as we tried to work as intelligent humans to extract information from our users. If this were to be a bot, they would not be able to edit prompts or ask deeper questions because it can only do what it was pre-programmed to do. The limitations of human wizarding became clear later when working with the conversational model. Without a bot to automatically respond to a user, we were left to pretend to be the bot and keep up a conversation as a bot while in class or in other inconvenient places. This would not be a problem if we were to automate this process.
In terms of next steps, more research and testing needs to be done to help users understand why completing the prototype is useful. A good place to start could be user interviews on the motivations for completing the end of quarter self-assessment. More research also needs to be done on making the prototype easy to complete. A next step could be more testing of the conversational feature of the bot, as well as actually building the tech for the bot. As we mentioned above, wizarding fails in certain situations when human intervention is too slow to mimic an actual conversation, which can break the flow of reflection for the user. Okay, thank you for listening.
Bye.